My mom is the great mother that everyone talks about. She's done everything for my older brother David's studies. To make sure he could study well, she created a detailed plan that covered every aspect of his day, from the moment he woke up to the minute he went to bed. She even went as far as to make sure his diet was balanced, not letting him skip anything. Even though David had seafood allergies and would throw up, she spent an entire night carefully preparing a dish with intricate carvings in the meat and shrimp paste stuffed inside garlic stalks. Yet, despite all this effort, David still couldn't show any gratitude. He would eat, and then immediately throw it up. Later on, rumors started to spread at school that David had developed a crush on his desk mate, Willow. So, my mom, fearing David might go down the wrong path, stormed into the school and demanded that Willow be expelled immediately. But when Willow transferred to another school, David passed away. Just when everyone thought my mom would change and live the rest of her life in regret, she said to me, "You can't be like your brother. Ungrateful. From now on, you'll be my only son. I'll give you all the love I had for your brother." What she didn't know was that I inherited many things from David, like his dreams, his friends, and even his girlfriend, Willow. But one thing I didn't inherit was his brains. As the saying goes, what goes around comes around. Her retribution is me. Chapter 1. When my brother David told Mom, I remember, I was still crawling on the floor. By the time I learned to walk, my brother had already finished 3 years of elementary school. When I couldn't even add or subtract within 10, David was already holding conversations in English. He skipped 2 grades. David had 2 good friends, both 4 or 5 years older than him, chosen by my mom when they were in middle school. One was good at science, and the other at literature. Every night, from 9:30 to 9:45, my mom would make David take turns playing with them. As for me, my time with David was limited to 10 minutes at most. Sometimes, I'd sneak over, and my mom would grab me by the neck and scold me, saying, "Get out." I'd struggle and shout, "I don't want Ultraman, I want my brother, brother, brother." David would look at me and laugh, but then I'd be thrown out. Afterward, I could hear my mom's gentle voice in the room. She asked, "Why were you laughing just now?" David replied, "I didn't laugh." Mom sighed and said, "David, I looked at the test, and why were you second this time? I've sacrificed my time with your brother to help you. Every point you get is from your brother's love. Do you understand?" David's voice dropped. He said, "The teacher made a mistake on one of the questions." Another student pointed it out, and the teacher gave her an extra point. Mom asked, "Then why didn't you point it out?" David went silent for a long time. I thought it was because David was scared. Ever since Mom sent a half-hour-long 60-second voice message to the parent group, David hadn't talked much with his teachers. The second time, that same girl tied with David for first place again. Mom stayed up all night, talked to the teacher for a long time, and even saw the test paper. The teacher praised David, saying he had done very well. These kinds of Olympiad questions are usually tough for most students. Mom asked how the girl, who hadn't studied Olympiad math, managed to solve them. The teacher said they were desk mates and helped each other, and David had explained the problems to her. Mom came home with a dark face. She usually didn't lose her temper, but this time, she called David over, made him sit in front of the computer, and memorize lines of code. She said, "Can't memorize it. It's so hard to memorize. These codes are written by your father, line by line. I've endured so much for you. I gave up my career to take care of you, and now the family has to rely on your dad's salary. Your dad works so hard for the money, and you just go around giving favors to your classmates. You're 11 now, not a little kid anymore. I didn't teach you to be selfish. You need to understand. Even 1 point can make a difference, and 1 point can decide whether you pass the exam or not." David, remember, success comes with sacrifices. David couldn't explain. His silence was just a temper tantrum. So Mom said, "Tomorrow, go find that Willow girl and ask her to pay back the money for the question, based on the tutoring fee." David's voice cracked as he said, "No." Mom shouted, "No, you have to go." David started crying. I rubbed my eyes and went out to call for Mom. She had to come over. When she was holding me and taking me back to my room, I said, "Mom, the teacher said that if you take something from a friend and change your mind, they'll get mad." Mom glared at me and said, "You're still young. You don't need to understand. I don't want you to have bad friends, especially girl friends, who just want to take advantage of you. But does that mean same-gender friends are always good?" I've seen those 2 older friends borrow money from David, claiming they'd pay him back. Chapter 2. David didn't ask his female classmate for money. He lied. He took the money from my piggy bank, 2 red bills. But it wasn't enough. Late at night, when I thought Mom was asleep, I quietly sneaked out of bed, took 2 more 50s from another jar, and gave them to David. I whispered, "Here's more. All for you, brother. Why aren't you asleep yet?" David was still sitting at the desk, in front of a white sheet of paper that was bigger than a world map, filled with grids. A plan for all 360 professions. Every day was scheduled, so dense and tight, like a beehive. He looked at the grid and said, I still have 2 tests left to finish today. I frowned. But the moon's already so high. Brother, will I have to do this when I start primary school next year? I'm so stupid. Even if Mom's hands were covered in candle wax, I still wouldn't be able to memorize it. David trembled slightly and said, No, you won't. I'll be here. He patted my head. Go to sleep. I walked to the door, and David, head lowered, had his shoulders trembling slightly. I ran back. David didn't lift his head, but tears were rolling down his cheeks. He said, That classmate helped me with the chores. I skipped grades and am younger than them, so no one plays with me. Only Willow does. She's my best friend. The only one. I said, Brother, don't cry. Just give the money to Mom tomorrow. It'll be fine. But it wasn't fine. Mom recognized the marks and serial numbers on the money. She had all my money numbered, and she had registered it with the shopkeeper at the convenience store outside the neighborhood. She called David over and gently asked, Is there anything you've been hiding from me? David said, No. Mom's voice grew even softer. She asked again, I'm asking you once more, is there anything you've been hiding from me? It was always like this. Before Mom got angry, she would always be particularly gentle. She asked, Do you feel embarrassed? You can tell me anything. Okay, David immediately said. No. Mom asked, How do you know what I'm asking about? David was on the verge of tears. Mom said, What did I teach you? To be open, bold, and confident. If you can't even face something small like this, how will you ever be independent? She softly said, Mom will help you get the money back. Okay, David cried out. No, I won't go. Mom replied, Don't be scared. We'll go now and talk it out. David stood still, and Mom tugged at him. For the first time, he resisted. He jerked his hand free, and in that moment, slap, his hand hit Mom. Mom covered her arm and quietly watched David for a while, then walked into her room and shut the door. I sighed with relief. Brother, it's okay. Mom won't go now. David's tears fell. He said, Willow's dad is a janitor. She only has 2 yuan for breakfast every morning. She doesn't have any money. If we go to ask for the money, she'll get beaten. But Mom didn't care. She didn't care, didn't speak, and didn't eat. She locked herself in her room. I knocked on the door, and Mom said, George, go to sleep. Mom's not feeling well. David knocked on the door, but Mom didn't respond. The next day, it was the same. She got up early as usual and made breakfast. Then, with a cold face, she shut herself in her room again. At dinner, we thought it might be better. Mom sat at the table. According to the grid plan, there were 4 dishes and a soup. I winked at David while eating. Every time David added another dish to his plate, Mom would move the dish closer to him. I could only pout and stand up to serve myself because Mom kept shifting the plates. When David finished eating, he volunteered to wash the dishes. Mom pushed his hand away coldly and silently walked into the kitchen. She didn't eat a single bite, her face looking pale. I asked her to eat, but Mom just dumped all the food into the trash. I'm not hungry, she said. On the 3rd day, David couldn't take it anymore. He left in the middle of the night, and after a long time, he came back. He was holding 300 yuan in his hand, wrinkled and crumpled. His lips were bleeding, and scabs had formed. He put the money at the door, then suddenly cried out loud. I had never seen David cry so miserably. I cried along with him, but when Mom opened the door, she smiled. She said, David, primary school friendships are nothing. I don't even remember the names of my elementary school classmates. Our future is as vast as the stars and the sea. Don't be sad. In the future, you'll have many amazing friends. Chapter 3. David got into the best middle school in our city. I went to the nearby elementary school. While I couldn't even distinguish between pinyin and letters, David was already in the 2nd year of middle school. He always had a head start. The mothers in the neighborhood group admired my mom. They'd ask her how she raised such a great son. While peeling and finely chopping the shrimp, Mom would say with a helpless sigh, Just use love, little by little, to influence him. David doesn't like scallions. When he was little, I tried everything, cooking every dish with scallions in it. If he didn't eat, I wouldn't either. I'd eat along with him. She pointed at me and continued, Then came this little son. He's picky. He was born weighing only 5 pounds. And from the start, well, a little ordinary. I don't expect much from him in this life. Just let him muddle through. The other mothers would say, It's still great. Mom showed them the new dish. And these shrimp, he absolutely won't eat them. So, I had to figure out how to hollow out the garlic shoots. Then stuff the shrimp meat inside. Once it's cooked, he doesn't even notice the difference. Raising kids, sometimes it really is a battle of wits. The other mothers were impressed again. No wonder David is so outstanding. Mom replied, There's nothing I can do. This is my life, sacrificing everything just to give my kids a head start. The other mothers said, Look at how hard your mom works. I said, But my brother doesn't like shrimp. Mom, why don't you give it to me? I like shrimp, Mom said. You eat whatever you want. Your brother works hard on his studies. Let him have it. She repeated the same thing again at the dinner table when David came home. There were 2 lion's heads and 2 fried eggs, perfectly matched. Mom told us to eat first. She needed to wash the dishes. David said, let's wash them after we finish eating. We'll do it together. Mom insisted. Eat first. David gave me 1 lion's head, leaving 1. Mom said, these lion's heads are made from the best pork belly, 30 yuan per pound. From the rear legs of a local pig. I chopped it all afternoon. I'm not eating. You have it. David said. Mom, you eat. Mom shot me a glare. I'm not hungry. You eat. You're growing. Mom served the garlic shoots with stir-fried pork to David. I quietly watched. David took the first bite and slightly furrowed his brow, but still swallowed without chewing. Mom added another full serving onto his plate. David, expressionless, kept eating until he finished it all. Mom gave him another look and reached to serve him a third bite. David suddenly picked up his bowl, lowered his head, and shoveled rice into his mouth. Mom didn't move. She just stared at him. I, with a bold face, stretched out my bowl. Mom, give it to me. I want some. Mom still just looked at David. She didn't say anything or move. Finally, she called, David. David kept shoveling rice. His cheeks puffed. She called again, David. David kept shoveling. Mom suddenly dropped her chopsticks, stood up, and walked to her room, slamming the door behind her. David kept eating. I glanced at the door and then at David. Brother, Mom's gone. Stop eating. David lifted his head and said, I'm not even hungry. Whether it's front or back legs of the pig, whether it's ground with a meat grinder or chopped with a knife, it's all the same. It's all shrimp flavored. The smell I hate. Her smell. This time, in the silent treatment, David didn't try to coax Mom like he used to. He spent all his days at school. From morning to night. After school, he went straight to his room. Mom stayed in her room for 2 days, and David didn't visit her. Then she got up and started searching inch by inch in his room. Finally, behind the grid planning sheet, she found something different. It was a faint trace of a photo. The photo left only a little flower mark on the paper, barely recognizable. Mom got a magnifying glass and slowly examined the faded remnants of the photo. Once she finished, she called David's homeroom teacher, her tone resolute. David was always obedient before. Suddenly, he changed, and now he's hiding a photo, one of those 2-inch photos used for student IDs. Probably a short-haired one. It's puberty, right? There's got to be something going on. The homeroom teacher said something on the other end. Mom replied, can you please send me a list of the female students in his grade? Mom had an excellent memory. She remembered everyone around David. She had already carefully screened his friends. In fact, on David's 10th birthday, 2 classmates who brought gifts were blocked by Mom outside the school gate. After asking about their grades and family background, David didn't have any friends. When the homeroom teacher refused, she went to the school gate and waited. She said, David has gotten perfect scores 739 times from elementary school to middle school. According to the plan, he'll be with you until the 3rd year of middle school. I'm here for his sake, and also for yours. If he really has mood swings from puberty, it will affect the honor of all of C City. If you don't take responsibility for this, I won't hesitate to transfer him to another school and give this honor to a teacher who truly deserves it. The homeroom teacher refused. Mom dragged me as a cover and sneaked into the school, going directly to the grade director. This time, she got the chance to view the list on the computer. She commented on each name, saying one was too active, another was too hot-tempered, and the few who cared more about their appearance than studying shouldn't sit near David. The grade director's face grew regretful. Mom said, this middle school hasn't had any students go to Tsinghua or Peking University in 3 years. Are you going to ruin this seedling? I didn't go directly to the classroom today out of respect for the teachers. I wanted to communicate with you first. I'm not afraid of trouble. When she saw the neighboring class list, she spotted a familiar name, Willow. She then said, why didn't you tell me they're in neighboring classes? One is in the first row of class 1, and the other is in the last row of class 2. The grade director asked what she meant. Mom said, I sent you and all the teachers an analysis and guidelines for David's characteristics, personality, and study habits at the beginning of the semester. It's a 27-page report. Didn't you read it? The grade director looked awkwardly at me, who was squatting on the floor playing with cards. Mom began reading the analysis she had written for David, one point after another. The grade director's face grew more complex. Curious students started to gather outside. Some heard Willow's name and rushed to spread the news. In the noise, David came into the cafeteria. Mom, still speaking in a calm and gentle tone, said, David is a genius I've raised for 14 years. I won't allow any little slut to ruin him. She was truly well-educated and well-mannered, even cursing so calmly. Mom turned to give her final verdict. Willow must transfer schools. Chapter 4. The grade director couldn't help but laugh in anger. David, who was 6 years older than me and almost 13, was now as tall as Mom. He reached for Mom's hand, but she slapped it away. He stubbornly tried again, but Mom coldly sneered. Turning to look at the girl by the door, she said, "Willow, right." Willow was as thin as a reed. Her skin wasn't very fair, but her facial features were delicate and pretty. I had seen this sister before, a couple of times. I noticed David would intentionally tie his shoelaces and walk behind her on the way to school. Mom said, "Willow, I've taught my son for 13 years, and I'm no match for your little face, which you've been watching for only 3 days. What's going on? You used to cling to him to learn math competitions when you were younger, and now you're at the same school, trying to seduce him. I don't understand. If you like him, what good will it do you to make my son like you?" Willow's face turned bright red, and she shouted, "I didn't." Mom said, "Didn't? It's easy to prove. Just pull up the hallway and gate surveillance footage from this semester. If you haven't spoken to him, I'll believe you." She stared directly into Willow's eyes, her gaze sharp and alert, like a lioness. She asked, "Do you dare? If you've spoken to him, you'll transfer schools." Willow's eyes turned red, and she whispered, "Ma'am." Mom smiled. "Calling me Mom won't help," David called out. "Mom." Mom said, "I knew it. Once men have money, they change. My son only gets 20 yuan for pocket money each week. After breakfast, there's no money left for even a drink of water. And you're so shameless, using the money your dad makes sweeping streets to make up for it." David's voice turned desperate. "Mom, please stop talking." Mom scolded. "If she dares to be cheap, I can't speak. If you don't want others to know, don't do it. I've marked and sewn the buttons and zippers on your clothes every day. Last Friday, when you came home, your zipper wasn't in the right place, and there were signs that your clothes had been pulled. I asked the homeroom teacher, and the only classes that stayed late that day were yours. Care to explain?" Willow burst into tears. "I really don't know." David stood in front of Willow, anger in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, Are you sick?" Mom smiled coldly. "Feeling sorry for her? Now you're defending her." David exploded. "You're the one who's sick. You're crazy." He reached out and pushed Mom hard. "Leave. Get out." Mom's smile froze for a moment, but she quickly steadied herself and then smirked again. She said, "Today, you think I'm crazy. It's fine. When you grow up, you'll understand who truly wants what's best for you." "David, I've sacrificed everything to send you to school, not for you to fall in love. If you can't control yourself now, you'll ruin your life later." David gritted his teeth. "What are you talking about?" He was truly furious now. At that moment, Willow, standing behind him, sobbed and said, "I don't like David. I like someone else." With those words, David froze. His face was like someone had slapped him. All the anger he had just felt in defending Willow disappeared in an instant. It was like a huge balloon that had been expanding, suddenly punctured by a single shot. Mom immediately burst into laughter. She said, "David, look at you. You're truly laughable. You're defending someone who doesn't even care about you." For her, you hid her student photo behind your exam vow sheet. You rushed to leave every day at the exact time. "Isn't that ridiculous?" David said. "I didn't." Willow, already embarrassed, ran off. People surrounded them. David's face turned pale, as white as a wall. I suddenly felt an indescribable fear. I pushed through the crowd and rushed to my mom. "Mom, please stop." Mom looked at David, then said, "It's fine if I stop, but if your brother softens and admits where he went wrong, I'll give him some face today." The old issue resurfaced, the night from 3 days ago. Mom had been waiting for David to apologize, the same apology he always gave, but this time, David didn't apologize. He turned and ran out of the room. I wanted to chase after him. Mom grabbed my arm and said, "What's there to chase? If you can't even bear this little bit of pressure, how will you face the college entrance exams? How will you face society?" I said. "But brother," she was unruffled. "I know my son. He has the ability to handle this kind of pressure. George, just watch. Sometimes, you need to deliver one strong blow so you don't get hit 100 times. From today, at least your brother can focus on his studies in peace for the next 3 years of middle school." She kept speaking. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from outside, followed by a scream. David jumped off the building. He didn't jump. He fell headfirst, as though he had no intention of surviving. Mom's hand went stiff in mine. "Brother," I screamed, crying out. Mom grabbed me tightly and tried to pull me away from rushing outside. The police and ambulance arrived. A white cloth covered David's body, and Mom seemed to age 10 years in an instant. Her hand was dry and stiff, pulling me away, leading me in the opposite direction. She had loved David as though it were to the bone, but in that moment, her heart seemed to turn into steel and stone. She said, "George, from now on, you are my only son. I'll give you all the love I had for David." I gritted my teeth, narrowed my eyes, and silently watched her, not saying a word. Chapter 5. That night, I cried myself to sleep. Later, My mom carried me to David's room. In the middle of the night, I heard her calling Dad. She said, "I'll give you back an excellent child." The next day at 6 in the morning, she woke me up. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her lips were tightly pressed together. She said, "George, Mom didn't sleep all night. I've analyzed your situation. Your foundation is too weak." I rubbed my swollen eyes. In front of Mom were all my textbooks and assignments from 1st and 2nd grade, along with test papers. There were dense circles and markings all over them. She said, "You made mistakes in the final nasal sound in pinyin in 1st grade, and you're still making the same mistakes in 2nd grade. Basic arithmetic rules are from left to right. Multiplication and division before addition and subtraction. You made this basic mistake 14 times. George, how can you still sleep?" I said, "Mom, I can sleep. I'm really tired." She frowned but ignored me, continuing to show me the new schedules and plans. She said, "Luckily, you're still in 2nd grade. A slow start, but if you switch to a better school, there's still a chance." I was too tired and yawned. Mom furrowed her brows and said, "When David was your age, I didn't have to call him. He would just get up. Your brother's greatest wish in life is to get into Peking University. George, can you live up to that? Your opportunity to study is something your brother fought for with his life." After yesterday's incident, Mom used the excuse that she wouldn't bring David back to ask for a spot in a key class for me. My yawn got stuck halfway. It felt like waking up from a dream, only to realize it was all real. I thought of David. I started crying. Mom said, "According to the memory spectrum method, from 6 in the morning to 10 is the best time for memory. Are you sure you want to spend this time crying?" "Only the weak cry." I said, "I'm sure, because I'm the weak one." She said, "Mom will teach you how to become strong." I replied, "But I like being weak. I want to be weak. By the way, when can I go see David?" She smiled, speaking slowly. "George, today, I'm going to teach you your first lesson. The weak have no right to make demands." At 7:30 in the morning, Mom took me to school as usual. She started worrying about my clothes, making me change into 3 different sets. Still frowning. "Why are the sleeves so much shorter? The pants are too short too." I had worn these same clothes for 2 years. She noticed that I hadn't eaten any fruit or carrots for breakfast, so she prepared 3 kinds of juice made from fruits and vegetables I hated. While I ate, she calculated how much free time I had during breaks and assigned me 12 vocabulary words and 2 poems. She said, "I don't want to pressure you too much, but we're already behind. If we work a little harder, just 1 extra hour a day, in a year, that's 365 extra hours, almost a whole semester's worth of study. Your brother jumped 2 grades. If you work hard, by the time you're in 6th grade, you can catch up with his pace." I said, "What if I can't catch up?" She replied, "It's impossible. This is the best elementary school in the city. This opportunity is precious. George, your brother is waiting for you. Do you think you can catch up?" On the way, we ran into some aunties from the neighborhood. The aunties had complex yet curious expressions on their faces. Mom took the initiative to announce, "Our George is preparing to transfer schools." She named the very competitive elementary school. The aunties were immediately intrigued. They asked, "Without a district house, how did you get into that school?" Mom clenched her jaw and said, "They owe me. They owe George." The auntie's admiration and agreement seemed to lift her mood a little. Once we were out of the elevator, she began to teach me. She said, "Did you see that? When facing failure, running away isn't the answer. You just need one more success, and others will keep envying you. Do you understand? Failure. Was David just a failure?" I looked at her opening and closing mouth, responding with no expression. "I don't understand." She furrowed her brows slightly and asked, "What?" I clenched my fists and yelled, "I don't know. I don't know." She calmly, gently pressed the elevator button to open the door. She waited until I finished shouting, then squatted down and looked into my eyes. She said, "George, do you feel better now that you've vented?" It was rush hour, with people waiting for the elevator on the 1st floor. Someone outside impatiently asked why Mom was blocking the elevator. Mom ignored them. She only slowly and deliberately asked about me. "I know you're under a lot of pressure. Do you feel better now?" The people outside started cursing, telling her to take the kid somewhere else and get out of the way. Mom's eyes went cold, and she turned around sharply, shouting, "Anyone who bullies my child will have to fight me." She looked at me and said, "Don't be afraid. Mom will protect you with her life." Tell me, did you understand what I just said? Did you hear it? If you did, I'll let go. More and more people gathered around, all staring at me. They didn't dare to provoke Mom, but their eyes kept urging me. All I had to do was say, "I understand," and it would be over. But suddenly, I laughed. I continued, "I don't understand." Mom's face shifted slightly. Finally, a middle school student in a hurry pushed past Mom to get inside, shoving her out of the way. Once we were out of the neighborhood gate, Mom took deep breaths, controlling her emotions. She adjusted her expression and calmly looked at me. she said. George, you just wasted the first fragment of time today. Tonight, you'll have to delay your bedtime by 10 minutes. I smiled and replied, okay. Chapter 6. I transferred into Class 2, Grade 2. During break, my desk mate, a girl, asked if I was David's younger brother, the one who jumped off a building. A few other classmates turned and smiled at me. I've always been able to sense the slightest malice in others' words. They smiled at me, so I smiled back slowly. Then my desk mate laughed loudly and said, hey, your brother jumped off a building. You're not going to do that too, are you? I laughed even more cheerfully and teased, ha ha ha. Who knows, maybe I'll jump with you. Her friends widened their eyes and started cursing at me, threatening to give me a lesson. This was nothing. This level of arguing, I dealt with worse in kindergarten. There were even fights back then. Mom didn't care much about me. I always had to handle things on my own. I still remember when I first started school. One day, after a fight with my desk mate, I went home. Mom was talking to David, saying if he got into that key high school, she'd take him and me on a trip. I'd been bitten on my arm and was bleeding, wanting to report it, but I was too eager to go on the trip with David, so I kept quiet. The next day, my desk mate taunted me again, saying her aunt was a teacher at the school, and no one dared to do anything. What's so special about a school teacher? I rolled up my sleeves, took a red marker, and circled the big tooth mark on my arm, holding it up as I ran to PE class. The principal stopped me and asked what was wrong. I immediately showed him the mark and wailed like a pig being slaughtered. The principal wiped my tears, but it seemed like it would never end. After rejecting all attempts at mediation, he finally had her aunt make her apologize to me in front of the whole class. After that, no one in class dared to mess with me. I went home excited to tell David about the fight I won, but David hung his head and said there was no more travel plan. Mom had torn up his passport and signed him up for 3 summer remedial classes, because he lost 3 points in his Chinese composition. In familiar arguments, that girl cried after I yelled at her, and she actually called for some bodyguards to fight me. I grabbed the strongest one and punched him a few times, then slapped that girl in a series of rapid hits. Once I'd had enough, I waited for them to fight back. I waited until the teacher came and hurriedly pulled them apart. It seemed like I was born with a kind of malice and coldness. I was different from David. I couldn't understand the burden of love that Mom felt. I just found it strange. I didn't really understand pain either. All I knew was that from now on, no one in class would laugh at David or bully me again. Before the bell rang for dismissal, Mom was called in for a parent meeting. This time, she arrived quickly, after the other parent apologized. Mom, upon learning that they worked at the Education Bureau, immediately forgave her. She even told the teacher to keep me and that girl as desk mates. She said, George, you have to get along well with your classmates. You can't just retreat when you face setbacks. You can't be like. She paused. I smiled. She was going to say, you can't be like your brother, right? The teacher fell silent. Only that girl looked at me, terrified, and screamed loudly. Chapter 7. The study plan for the first day was a complete disaster. When I got home, Mom didn't ask about what happened today. She only asked how much of the study work I had completed. She said, finish today's tasks today. Then she took out my homework and circled the classes I missed. Those things I couldn't finish even if I stayed up all night, and I didn't want to do them at all. My nosebleed had stopped, and the scar on my face had scabbed over. Mom looked at me and said, your eyes are fine, and your hands are okay. Get to work. I pressed my pen and started drawing circles on the paper. Mom made some soup and set the alarm for every 10 minutes. When I tried to sleep, she woke me up. I said I had a stomachache and went to the bathroom. I locked the door behind me. I just slept in there. 10 minutes later, Mom called, but I didn't answer. She started knocking on the door, then she began pounding on it. Next, she started banging the door, but the door was sturdy. Finally, there was silence outside. Just as I was about to fall back asleep, there were a few loud bangs, followed by the sound of something being chopped with a knife. The door opened. Mom was holding a kitchen knife, and she kicked the lock aside. George, get up. I got up, and she stood there holding the knife, looking at me for a moment. Suddenly, she walked to my room and began chopping the locks on both my room and David's room. Mom's madness was calm. In its own way, she said, in the past, I neglected you and didn't teach you what's right or wrong. I won't be angry with you today. From now on, I'll explain it all to you slowly. I looked at her, really not angry. I walked over directly and smashed the glass in the kitchen with a stick. The pieces crashed to the balcony. The whole neighborhood was startled. I received the harshest beating. My backside turned purple. My feet swelled. This was where Mom's bottom line was. After she finished hitting me, panting, she adjusted her clothes and said, I don't regret hitting you today. I didn't regret it either. I knew that if I finished my homework today, I would just have more homework tomorrow. After today's beating, at least I could rest for 2 hours. Mom was right. I was really like her. She had planning skills, and so did I. She had malice, and so did I. It took me a whole semester to make her realize that there was no hope for my grades. The things the teacher taught, I always got wrong. The mistakes I made last time would be corrected the next time, only to be wrong again after that. In an ordinary school, I was ranked around 30th. In a top school, it was still around 30th. At home, the study plans were revised dozens of times. After the summer break, during the new semester, I failed my English exam. Mom was furious. She refused to go to the parent-teacher meeting. That night, at 1 a.m., she woke me up and said, "How can you sleep like this? Your brother gave his life to give you this chance, and your grades are a mess. How can you sleep?" She took a deep breath. She said, "Come on, let's go over the wrong questions, one by one." I looked at her and waited for her to explain. After she finished, she asked if I understood. I said, "No." She explained again. I said, "Still don't understand." On the third try, she suddenly lost her temper and slapped me. She gritted her teeth and said, "Is this on purpose? Are you doing this on purpose?" I said, "No, I just don't understand." The calm expression in the mirror mirrored the curve of her face from before. She became enraged again. Like a storm, slaps rained down. I ran. She locked the door behind me, and when I tried to push her, she slammed me down on the couch, pressing a cushion against my nose. She yelled, "How can you be so stupid, so useless?" I felt like I was suffocating, and my lungs were about to burst. Just when I was about to lose consciousness, fresh air rushed back in. Mom started crying again, sad and heartbroken. She said, "I just want you to do well in school. I sacrificed my job, my body, and even the times I see your dad. Have you forgotten that? I love you so much. What did I do wrong? Giving birth to you, this curse. What do you want? And I haven't given it to you. I let you balance work and rest, and you already have so much less homework than your brother. What more do you want? You want a puppy. I told you, if you get first place, I'll get you one. Whatever breed you want." That same line she once said to David now fell on my ears. She forgot. I have a good memory. I just pretended not to. The puppy she mentioned wasn't even something I liked. It was something David wanted. That year, David got the puppy as a reward. But 2 months later, the puppy was thrown out because he got a word wrong. So I laughed and said, "I don't know, Mom. Is it possible that you're teaching me wrong? Same class, same me. But when other students explain it to me, I understand. But when you explain it to me, I just don't get it. Could it be that your method is wrong, Mom?" A slap. I continued talking incessantly. "But I just don't understand what you're saying, Mom. How about you explain it again?" She suddenly stood up. She shouted, "Useless thing. You just refuse to learn. Advanced Montessori education isn't suitable for you. You're better off with this." She grabbed a clothes hanger. With David gone, Mom no longer pretended to be that gentle, elegant, highly educated woman, and I no longer pretended to be the clever and obedient younger brother. Mom doesn't hit faces. It's always the body. It didn't matter. The next day, I wore a short-sleeved shirt. The aunties in the neighborhood saw me, and this time, they didn't say Mom loved me. Instead, they looked at me with sympathy. They murmured, "Used to be." I knew it. "You can't push kids that hard," Mom angrily retorted. "Shut up, you know nothing." She turned and gave me a fierce look. She said, "Are you happy now? I'll get a new son, and I won't need you anymore." For other kids, those would have been the most malicious words, but for me, they didn't have any power. Chapter 8. My life returned to how it was before. In the mornings, there were no more 3 kinds of disgusting vegetable and fruit juices. Mom stopped caring about my clothes. Dinner became leftover lunch. Mom started taking her medication seriously, and she began to monitor every cycle of her period. Before, she used to get easily irritated right before her period, but now, even a week before her period, she would still be angry, saying, "Just wait." She also said, "If you could improve your grades, I wouldn't have to work so hard." As if that child was meant for me. She told me I didn't deserve to sleep in the room of a top student. I went back to my little room. David's things were cleared out. Aside from his study notes and homework, all his sketchbooks and other drawings were packed and thrown away. I dug them out of the trash, one by one, reading through them over and over again. What she didn't know was that I could do all of the homework. The lessons the teacher gave weren't hard. David's notes had everything I needed to learn, with explanations and annotations. Back when I said I was afraid of studying, he prepared everything for me. I also inherited everything from David, including his friends who always asked him for money. Every month, I had to give them money just like David did, but I could give more, because I kept the money I would have spent on breakfast. By the 7th month, Mom was 5 months pregnant. I had lost weight and weighed only 60 kilograms. I had saved up 600 yuan, and those 2 friends of David had turned 18. When I gave them the money, The 600 yuan accidentally showed, and they grabbed it all at once. As I walked out of the alley without surveillance, I messed up my hair and cried as I walked. Willow ran into me and asked what happened. I pointed to the alley and cried. The two guys happened to come out and, seeing Willow, they smirked and asked her if she wanted to join them for a drink at a nightclub. Willow grabbed me and ran. She called the police for me. Chapter 9. I was of age, and the money was there. Both of them were locked up. The other parents caused a scene at our house. Mom didn't believe it, saying, "How could this be? Their grades were so good in elementary school, and they did well in middle school too." The police officer frowned and said, "Grades don't determine character. Don't you know they've been extorting your son?" Mom asked, "How could that be? Why didn't you tell me?" I replied, "Would it have made a difference? When David told you for the first time, you didn't care at all. Back then, Mom had said not to be too petty. A few yuan for friends to have a drink was just normal socializing. She said David was too stingy, which was why he didn't have any friends. She even made him bring homemade cake to apologize to them. Because these two friends were carefully chosen by Mom, they came from good families and had high status in the neighborhood." Mom said. I thought. She paused for a moment. I smiled and said, "David's art books are filled with these experiences. Over 20 of them, all stacked in the box by the door." "Mom, you look at homework every day. Didn't you see them?" "Oh, I forgot. You don't look at those worthless art assignments." Those two guys never imagined things would get this serious. More things came to light. David had been bullied for a long time. There was that one time when his collar was torn, and Mom said it was a problem with Willow. But it had actually been because David had let Willow go first and was then robbed by these two. Mom stood there listening halfway. Her lips trembled as she asked, "How could that be?" David never said anything. I looked at Mom. If only she had shown the slightest bit of regret. If only she had felt some compassion for David. I said, "Mom, do you remember the photo on the back of the study schedule?" Mom turned to look at me. I said, "That photo wasn't Willow's. It was yours, Mom. We had promised to travel together." But Mom tore up the passport. David had painstakingly pieced together the broken photo. I continued, "David said that your wish for the new year was to travel together. And that's why he made that wish." His Chinese composition lost 3 points because the topic was my hometown. But all David knew were the neighborhood, school, and tutoring center. He could only write about the park next to the neighborhood. She mumbled, unwilling to believe it. She said, "So, he's resentful of me?" I sighed and said, "No, he never was." Mom said, "No, he's resentful. He's definitely resentful." I frowned and said, "No, he wasn't. Over 20 art albums, 1 per year." Mom's back in the kitchen. Mom writing plans. Mom being happy, elevated. If David hadn't had so much love, how could he have endured so much submissiveness? The police officer couldn't help but say, "You parents can't only care about your child's grades." Mom suddenly exploded, shouting, "Is this my fault? Coward. Really a coward. How did I end up with such a cowardly son?" Her eyes turned red as she stomped her foot. I heard her say, "He deserves it. He's just a deserving fool." I suddenly lunged forward and shoved her to the ground. It only lasted a second before Mom reacted. I received a solid slap across the face, and she threw me hard into the table. I started bleeding from my nose. Mom was pulled away. She struggled to give me another slap, yelling, "You worthless thing. You killed your brother, and now you want to kill your little brother. If it wasn't for you always covering for your brother, how could his mind be so fragile? Right, it's all your fault." She was never wrong. It was always someone else's fault, just like with the baby inside her. The doctor had clearly said that this baby might have problems. They suggested an amniocentesis to check for Down syndrome, but she said, "This pregnancy, the timing, the medicine, it's just like when I was pregnant with David. How could there be a problem?" She cursed me in the house, saying, "Even if it's dumb, it won't be dumber than you, you idiot." All her love was built on grades and face. Once that was gone, she showed her most terrifying side. It's like treating a stock you've bought. Chapter 10. I coldly looked at her. I said, "David is fragile because he loves you. You're not fragile because you don't love him at all." Mom said, "I've sacrificed so much. I gave up my job for him. I'm a college graduate, but I became a housewife. I gained so much weight, ruined my figure, and did all this for him. Of course, he should love me." I replied, "You think I don't know?" Mom looked at me with confusion. I continued, "You didn't quit your job. You never even had a job. You went to a junior college, but you didn't even get your diploma. You couldn't even pass the 4th level of English in college. You were this weight before you got married, and you're still the same after. It's not because of us that you gained weight. And everyone in the neighborhood knows that when you lecture people on parenting, they know you just read about it online. They all laugh at you." Mom lunged at me, trying to hit me. She shouted, "I'll tear your mouth off." This time, The result of my outburst was that Mom said I was hopeless, that my wings had hardened, and that from now on, she would pretend I wasn't her son. She would no longer show me any love. She called my dad, who was stationed abroad, saying she was going to send me to the countryside. She said, "George's IQ is low. He's useless. He's just a burden. I don't want him. And you don't have to either. I'll give you another son, just like David." My dad, who had been sent abroad when I was 3, only needed to earn money. When he was studying, he was only responsible for studying. When he was working, he was only responsible for working. And when it came to being a father, his only job was to respond with a "hey." His life was so simple. It was cruel to others. He didn't care about the family or the children's education. He was like a zombie. Occasionally, he would suddenly come back to life, and then he would severely discipline us, especially me. Mom called him on speakerphone. Dad said, "George is toxic. He's only close to his brother. Doesn't care about anyone else. It's like he has no heart. If you have another child, it's better if it's a son." Mom proudly replied, "It's most likely going to be a son. I've looked at the pregnancy chart." After she finished speaking, she turned to look at me, sneering. "Not only do I think you're a waste, but even your dad says you're no good. He has no feelings for you." I thought to myself, feelings, they need to be cultivated. They're not just some gift from blood relations. Chapter 11. I finished elementary school in the countryside. My grandparents didn't understand or care about me. I skipped 2 grades, and they were only responsible for signing papers. When I started middle school, Mom gave birth to a daughter. The new daughter was beautiful, with wide-set eyes and large pupils. When the new daughter was 1 year old, Mom came to visit me. I was running around like crazy at school. That month's exam, I was second to last in the class. The teacher told my mom, "George usually does well. How did he suddenly do so badly?" Mom, disappointed, scoffed, "Don't flatter him. Do you think I don't know his level?" When the new daughter went to kindergarten, I started attending a middle school in the countryside. Mom came to visit again. She looked much more haggard. She asked me, "Do you realize your mistake?" I said, "Are you asking if it was wrong for me to say you didn't work, or if it was wrong for you to curse at people? Which one?" Mom trembled with anger. She said, "If you come back with me now, you can still have a future. If you stay in this countryside school, your life is ruined." The class teacher frowned at her, and understood why I wanted her to remain silent. Mom softened her tone and said, "George, I heard you came 3rd in the class this time. You have potential if you get some tutoring." I smiled and said, "You mean that score? I copied it." "Well, not really copied. I had my deskmate and the person behind me copy it. We all tied for 1st, and I came 3rd because of my surname." Mom turned pale for a second. She said, "You." I said, "What can I do? I'm just stupid. I can't learn." Mom looked at my new clothes and asked, "Where did you get the money to buy these clothes?" I smiled and said, "I stole it. For the 3 years of middle school, I got 100 yuan a month for living expenses. Without the school's subsidies and the teacher's support, I would have struggled even more." Mom stood there, speechless. There was a hint of regret in her eyes. When the class bell rang, I quickly ran to class. Mom didn't visit for a long time. I won 1st place in the provincial physics competition during middle school, and was placed on the high school admission list. I kept the certificate with the class teacher. When I got home, my grandmother's phone was blown up. It was a call from Mom. She said, "I saw online that the winner of that competition is named George." I laughed and said, "What? I won a prize? Haha, what nonsense. It's probably someone with the same name." Mom sneered, "I knew it. How could you? With your grades, you can't even copy properly. With your pig brain, how could you be half as smart as your brother?" I replied, Right, Mom. How's the new daughter doing?" We were both good at attacking each other. On the other end of the line, I could hear a child screaming. My mom hung up the phone. When I entered high school early, Mom's new daughter finally started elementary school. She didn't have time for me. When I was in my senior year, Mom probably thought I would graduate from middle school soon. After the college entrance exam that summer, everything was settled. On June 20th, I was working a summer job. She finally called me. Mom said she had finished my 9 years of compulsory education. If I wanted to continue studying, I had to come home and talk things through. She said, "High school isn't that easy without your parents' support. How long can you keep your stubbornness?" I said, "I'm not going to high school. I'm going to work." In the restaurant, I could hear the boss urging me. Mom caught on. "You really are working?" I said, "Yeah, 3,000 a month. Next week I'm going to work in a factory. It comes with food and lodging, and I heard they pay 5,000 a month, plus overtime." Mom hesitated and said, "George, do you really have to be like this with me? Your sister isn't doing well. If you come back, I can help you. If you want to study in high school, I can help you." I said, "Even if I'm dumb, I'm still smarter than her, right?" I'm evil. Mom, how could you forget that? Mom became agitated. She always had trouble controlling her emotions when it came to me. She yelled. If you hadn't bumped into her that day, her brain wouldn't be this messed up. Now she's in the big class and still can't go to the toilet on her own. The teacher said she should be taken to the hospital. Shouldn't you be responsible? I laughed and said, we can't afford to take her to the hospital, Mom. She ground her teeth and said, hospital? I know my child better than anyone. She's just a little slow to mature. How could there be a problem? You're the older brother. You need to take responsibility. Didn't your brother take care of you when you were younger? Didn't you learn anything from him? I replied, why should I take responsibility for something that was a product of your happiness? Mom paused and said, why are you so evil? I laughed and said, thanks to how well you raised me, Mom. I'm going to work. You think I'm the most useless temporary worker. As long as I didn't go crazy. It turned out I was the only sane one. I hung up the phone. Chapter 12. My college entrance exam results were good enough for me to get into a top university. I chose a school in a special economic zone and was awarded a full scholarship. The day I received my acceptance letter, the whole town's schools were abuzz. My name was listed on the honor roll in elementary and middle school. I had skipped 2 grades. I ranked 27th in the province and 1st in the county. After sharing the news of my new high school, I returned to my middle school. The class teacher excitedly clapped for me, and I walked up to hug her. The teachers had prepared many gifts for me. Supportive businesses gave me rewards, and I bowed, thanking them one by one. The warmth was unfamiliar yet sincere, a long-lost familiar feeling. It was like the candies my brother had left me when we were kids, the finger that had woken me up at midnight to brush my teeth. My brother said, it'll get better, George. It will get better and better. Just hang in there. Elementary school will pass. Just hang in there. Middle school will pass. No, my dear brother, things will get better, but they must be far away from getting worse. Look at that. True love never comes with expectations or demands for reciprocal returns. Amid the beaming smiles and blessings, there was no need for pretense. The tears fell by themselves. I held my brother's last drawing book in my arms. The graduation plan written in it was being realized one by one. When I got on the bus, my parents finally arrived. Not only did they come, but they also brought my new daughter. The new daughter, wearing a pretty dress, with wide eyes, immediately started calling out when she got off the bus. Dad scolded Grandpa and Grandma for not telling him about something so big. Grandpa and Grandma said, we old folks don't understand. We just knew he passed the exam. We didn't know it was for university until we arrived. But he's not even at the age to go to college yet. Mom let go of my sister's hand and rushed over. She said, how could this be? Isn't he supposed to be in 3rd year of middle school? Wasn't he working washing dishes? The class teacher said, George's grades are excellent. He skipped 3 grades, twice in elementary school, once in middle school. Didn't you know? A genius like him is truly rare. Mom looked at me in disbelief and said, how could this be? I didn't even tutor him. He didn't do any of those plans. I still remember how he didn't understand basic math operations. He couldn't solve problems, and he fought and stole. How could this be? She stuttered and was speechless, staring in shock. The class teacher stepped forward and said, you've got it wrong. George is a model student. Always an outstanding student and academic role model. If you'd ask the teachers, you would know he's always done well. Mom muttered, no way. How could this be? He must have cheated. You should check the surveillance cameras. He must have copied. The class teacher sighed and said, how could that be? He won 1st place in the provincial physics competition, 2nd place in the biology competition, and 1st place in the English competition. Dad's mouth dropped open. He said, this is the useless son you told me about. You said he was useless, and this daughter of yours is a genius. He looked at my new daughter with disgust and said, you lied to me, throwing my son to the countryside and missed the best time to bond with him. What will you do to make up for that? My Wang family is relying on him to carry on the bloodline. Do you understand? I frowned and said, we didn't have any bond anyway. He said, I'm your father. He brought out the father card. I asked, is that so? He said, we've given you living expenses. I said, I remember. I'll pay it back later. With the current bank interest rates, I'll also pay for your pension as required by the court. Mom said, you've become so successful. Can you really do it without us? If it weren't for me. She trailed off. The gym teacher, whose voice was loud, interrupted. He said, is this how you two act as parents? He's so young, and you just throw him out to fend for himself. You don't even know what grade he's in. And his living expenses weren't even enough for food. George, poor guy, had to endure all that with you. What's this about plans? Talking about responsibility in the class group. Stop trying to motivate him. First, motivate yourselves. One's a failure, the other's wandering through life, and you still demand so much from your child, and now that he's still in school, you're asking for money, Pa. He gave them a good scolding. My dad didn't dare to step forward after seeing the gym teacher's build. Mom's eyes showed deep regret. She said, "George, I didn't know, all these years. I've been thinking about you. It's all because of this sister of yours that I couldn't leave. Maybe we should send her to the countryside and have you come back with Dad and me." I looked at her but didn't say anything. My sister understood and immediately bit into her hand, shouting, "Bad, bad, throw me away, hit me, hit me." She was so strong that Mom's face turned red. Tears streamed down her face, and she said, "George, look at Mom. Help me, please." Chapter 13. I smiled as I walked out. The car waiting outside had arrived. I was going to the next event to share my story. Then I would go to the place my brother once spoke about, to see it for myself in his stead. I hugged my notebook and walked step by step towards the door. If they had looked, if they really cared, if they had ever loved that child, they would have recognized their son's handwriting on it. They would have remembered the promises they failed to keep, but they didn't. The crowd, clearly divided. I took one last look at them, my mom tightly gripped by the new daughter. The three of them arguing and entangled, like an unsolvable DNA helix. Pain, sharp and explosive, yet unable to break free. In the instant the car door closed, I placed my brother's notebook into my backpack and took out my own. I noted down the 2 donations I had just received, and the set of paintbrushes from my junior, Anna, the flower scarf my grandma wanted. All those little, beautiful things, they were taught to me by my brother, and I recorded them one by one. On some day in the future, when we meet again, it will be like the paintbrush in my hand at that very moment. A reunion that transcends time, layer by layer, becoming the base color of my life. I will shine as brightly as I want to.